Okay, so in previous lecture we start the topic of the disinfection. Okay, so the disinfection, it is a process of killing of harmful bacteria. Okay, so which also removes the dissolved organic salt, color, odor, dust from the water. Okay, so the material which is used for the process of disinfection, that is called as a disinfectant, and the disinfectant should be having some qualities, and that qualities we discussed in the previous lecture. That is, this disinfectant dose should be give protection against the contamination of water. Next, it must be effective to kill the harmful bacteria to make the water safe. Next, it should be harmless, it should be economical, it should be easily available. Next, the nature of that disinfectant in a such a way that its strength can be easily determined. Next, it should not need the skill labor for the apply of that disinfectant. Okay, so as the labor India as a labor costs, it going to be increase the cost of the disinfection of water, cost of the treatment of water. Okay, so each and every can be easily apply that disinfectant. So the skill labor shall not be need to use of this disinfectant. Next, it should work at a normal temperature and it should be take a reasonable time for the disinfection of water. Okay, so these are the different qualities of a disinfectant. Okay, so now what are the different disinfectants which are used for the disinfection process? Okay, so if you are considering the methods of disinfection, so the first one is the chlorination. It is one of the major method which used and most acceptable method which is used for the disinfection of process. Okay, so chlorination, it is one of the important, major and most acceptable method of disinfection. Next, second method is the boiling method, that is nothing but to boil the water. Next, excess lime treatment, to add excessive lime to the water. Next, iodine and bromine, so we can add the iodine and bromine tablet to the water. Next, ozone treatment. So this ozone treatment required the production of ozone, and after that ozone is going to be passed through the water and that act as a disinfectant. Okay, so in ozone treatment we need to generate the ozone, and after that we need to transfer that ozone through the water body. Next, potassium permanganate treatment, silver treatment, then UV rays ultraviolet treatment. So here is also the we have to produce the high voltage ultraviolet rays, and after that the water is allowed to pass through that UV rays, ultraviolet rays. Okay, so this method, like a ozone treatment method or ozonation, that ozone treatment process is called as ozonation. Okay, and this UV ultraviolet treatment method, these are the most costly method which are used for the disinfection of process. Okay, because why? Because it needs to generate the ozone in ozonation process, and after the process carried out, and similarly UV rays, ultraviolet rays, which are produced to disinfection of water. Okay, so these two method, ozone treatment and UV rays treatment method, these are the most costly method which used sometimes in water treatment method. But if you visit the local water treatment plant, they are used mostly the chlorination. It is one of the method for the disinfection of water. Okay, for public water supply. Okay, so why the chlorination is used? Why the chlorination is most acceptable method for disinfection? What are the different advantages of chlorination process? Okay, so if you are considering the process of disinfection, that is chlorination. Okay, so first thing is that what is chlorination? So chlorination, it is nothing but, so you can see the definition of chlorination. Okay, so that going to be discussed. Okay, so chlorination, it is nothing but the process of application of chlorine to the water. Okay. So this chlorine is act as a disinfectant. Okay. So and the process of application of chlorine is called as chlorination. Okay. So the apply of chlorine to the water, that process is called as chlorination. And when we are going to use the chlorine as a disinfectant, that is called as chlorination, and the chlorine is act as a disinfectant. Okay, so what are the different advantages of the chlorination process? Okay, so the first advantage of the chlorination is it is very easy to apply due to its high solubility. Okay, so this chlorine is highly soluble in water, so is easy to apply. Okay, so applicable is easy, then it's having high solubility, so that is the first advantage of the chlorine. It is easily applicable, and the next thing is it's highly soluble in water. Second advantage of chlorine is it is available in all forms. That means chlorine is available in all forms, that is in the form of gas, in the form of liquid, in the form of solid. Okay, so mostly the chlorine is available in gas, then chlorine is available in liquid also, and the chlorine is available in the solid lump or solid powder. Okay, so that means this chlorine is available in all form, that is solid, liquid, and gas form. Okay, third advantage of chlorination is it stops all the metabolic activities are stopped because it is very toxic to most of the organism. Okay, so this chlorine is very highly toxic to the organism, so it stops all the metabolic activities, so that activities of microorganism, activities of bacteria, that going to be stopped by the chlorine. So this chlorine is why it is because chlorine is very toxic to the organism. Okay, so the next, the solution left after the chemical reaction, it is harmless and still useful to provide in a water distribution system. Okay, so as we already discussed the quality of disinfectant, in that we discussed the dose of the disinfectant should be give protection against contamination of water. Okay, so here is the chlorine is one of the major disinfectant which gives the protection against the contamination of water during the distribution system or during the retention. Okay, so after the addition of chlorine, the solution or the chlorine is left into the water and it is harmless and still useful to provide in the water distribution system. Okay, so if you are going to apply 2 ml of chlorine, so at the end of the tap it may be 0.2 to 0.5 ppm of chlorine. Okay, may be available at the tap at the end of the tap. Okay, so that is what the dose of chlorine always available into the water. So if the chlorine is available into the water, it's going to be reduced the chances of contamination of water. It's going to be reduce the chances of growth of the bacteria. It's going to be reduce the metabolic activities. Okay, so that is what the advantage of the presence of chlorine into that water. So first thing, it stop metabolic activities, it avoid the contamination of water, and it prevent the regeneration or growth of the bacteria and organism. So that is what the major advantage of the chlorine. That is what the result of chlorine is a long-term effect. So that is what the next advantage of chlorination. The result remains for a very longer time. So if you are going to add the chlorine at one time, the result or the residue of the chlorine is remains present for a very longer time. That result is for a very longer time. The next major advantage of the chlorination process is the system is very cheap and very reliable. Okay, so the system of chlorination is very cheap and very reliable, and the major thing is that the chlorination for disinfection of water is one of the major or one of the best method. That is what nothing but a chlorination. Okay, so chlorination, it is one of the best method which is used for the disinfection, as these are the various advantage of the chlorine. Okay, so the one thing is important in process of chlorination is that what is the exactly dose or what is the correct dose of chlorine, and the total or the result or the best result of this dose is depend upon the correct dose of chlorine. Okay, so how much dose should be applied to the water so that the effect should be long-term effect and that also should not affect over the human being who are going to consume the water. Okay, so those people who are going to consume the water, so the chlorine should not affect over that human health. Okay, so that the correct dose is very important in case of the chlorination process. Okay, so that is the thing. The only danger in this treatment, that is what, it needs to have a correct dose to get the best result. Okay, suppose if the dosage is less than required, it fails to disinfect the water. सपोज तुमच्या वॉटरसाठी टू ppm किंवा 2 mg per liter एवढा क्लोरीन रिक्वायर आहे, बट इफ यू आर गोइंग टू ॲड ओनली 1 ppm or only 1 mg per liter of water, so what happen, it fails to disinfect it completely. तुमचं डिसइन्फेक्शन होणार नाहीये, कलर ओडर टेस्ट रिमूव्ह होणार नाहीये, बॅक्टेरिया किल होणार नाहीये, and also the oxidation of water does not take place. Okay, so these are the different maybe disadvantage. Okay, so if the doses is less than the required, it fails to disinfect the water. And opposite is that what? Suppose the water if get the more dose, or if it is a more dose than the required quantity, it change the taste and may change the odor of that water. So that is what the second thing. Okay, suppose if you are going to add 2 ppm तुमची requirement आहे, आणि suppose in that case if you are going to add 3 to 4 ppm, that is excess of 2 ppm dose. Okay, so if you are going to add excess of the dose, that going to be change the taste of the water, sometimes maybe the color of water also going to be changed, and also the change the odor. Okay, so these are the various disadvantages of excessive dose of the chlorine. So these all are the various advantages of the chlorine. So that chlorination is one of the most acceptable and the best method which is used for the disinfection of water.